There we go. That's better. I actually started out, I went to Triton Junior College in River Grove, Illinois. Had been recruited by Valpo out of high school, but when I was graduating high school, I was 5'9", about 160 pounds, soaking wet. And I was kind of like Thomas the Train Engine. I knew I was going to grow. And went to Triton, had a really good season there, and things were looking good to go play elsewhere, and hurt my knee. And Coach Grimmett, who had recruited me out of high school, called and said, "We know about your injury. We still want you here. We're still going to give you money." And ended up making the best decision I ever made because I didn't think I was going to play ball again, quite honestly. And then came here. I knew I'd have a little bit of a road to recovery, but I was excited to come here at that time because I looked at the local roster that they had brought in: Jason Evans, Rob Bach, Eric Miller. Ended up Craig Fanton later on came, and I mean, I knew what they were building was pretty great, and Ozzie Young was already here, and that helped as well.
All right, so let's get a little background here. In that time, there was a Division II conference. This kind of doesn't exist anymore. It's a combo. And Valpo was in this Division II conference, and it was all powerhouse teams. Saginaw Valley State, Grand Valley State, Ferris State, all Division II powers. And Valpo went, I think it was 3 years and won a total of 2 games. And that's when you came in, and you guys won some games in that league.
You did.
Right? You beat Indianapolis. You had 3 wins that year. Yep. In your first year, in which you were rehabbing, I think, for about the first half of the season, if we recall correctly. And then you got a chance, finally, okay, you played some special teams. There was an injury to another player, and they said, all right, Shayne's ready to go, and they put you in, and the rest is history.
Yeah, the first 4 or 5 games, I was still in rehab mode and played a lot of special teams and had great experience. Mark Peterson, who's at Chesterton, was a position coach, still just a great guy. And Jim Zablonski, who was a senior at the time, got hurt in the 4th or 5th game. And once I went in, I never came off the field after that.
And then I think Valpo kind of turned the corner, and it was in part because you got out of that league. And the Pioneer Football League, which Valpo is in now, was founded. And it was a lot of Midwest good basketball teams that were Division I in basketball, and the NCAA kind of forced this issue for there to be if you're Division I in basketball, you had to be technically Division I in football. And you guys still had some scholarship players, as you said, from Division II, who then got to play non-scholarship Division I. It's a little confusing, but it was Evansville had a football team then.
Yep.
Butler had a football team then, and a great rivalry between those 3 interstate schools kind of formed. And Valpo had struggled against those teams previously, but you guys started to get the better hand against those teams.
We did. It took time, but we had a really good nucleus, a good recruiting class where they can still offer money the year I came in, even though we were making the conference switch. And they did an amazing job of recruiting, brought in a lot of local talent, a lot of good offensive players as well. But for the first time in a long time, and in my first year, we hung with Butler. We now played Dayton, who was always a good team. Hung with Dayton. So we started hanging around our sophomore year. Then my junior year, we started doing pretty well. And by the time we were seniors,
You were beating them.
we had one of the best defenses. It was an amazing defense with a bunch of great players.
And we're going to talk a lot about beating Butler today. And that's coming up throughout the course of the next half an hour. We can start 93, it was your junior year, and you went to Butler, and I think you had an interception early in the game.
Yes.
And it led to kind of a long day for you. What do you remember? Do you remember anything about that day?
I don't remember anything. I'll be completely honest. Besides what my parents recollect. So in the first quarter, I had an interception. I saw 70 yards of green grass. I mean, I am thinking pick 6. I'm running this to the house. And all I had to beat was this huge lineman that I had played against in high school named Renee DeLuna from Hammond High. And he was a monster. And so, but I'm thinking, this is the only guy I got to juke. So I go to juke him. My foot gets caught in the turf. Next thing I know, I have smelling salts underneath my nose and run off for a play because concussions didn't matter back then. And so my coach, Sam Bernardi, I made the defensive secondary calls. Still to this day, he'll tell the story that he called cover 3, cover 1, cover 2, whatever coverage we were in. I saw triple. And
Your eyes were blurred.
So all I called was cover 1. We were in man coverage the rest of the game. And so the funniest part of this story is that my parents had to take me back to Hammond, where I grew up, took me to the hospital, had one of my worst concussions, and there were many. And I always joked with my teammates that, I was known not just for intercepting passes, but the hardest hitter in the secondary.
Correct.
And I always said, I'm going to be on ESPN's Hit of the Week. I mean, you are going to hear that, and I'm going to knock someone out. And all of a sudden, I'm laying in bed that night after the concussion. I hear, da-da-da, da-da-da, from Indianapolis, Indiana, the Hit of the Week, and it's me getting killed.
So you did make the Hit of the Week.
I did.
Not the way you wanted it.
Not the way I ever envisioned that. Ever.
All right, the highlight year was the following year. You guys finally turned the corner. You beat Evansville, you beat Butler. You started the Butler game with an interception again.
Right.
We heard that Shayne is 5th all-time in interceptions in the history of the PFL. The amazing thing is he only played in the PFL for 2 years. So you can think about that. If Valpo had been a PFL team for 4 years,
I'd like to think so.
you would own the record for most interceptions. But
Right.
as I look back at those games, and I can remember them vividly. I remember the Evansville game. You mentioned Ozzie Young. That was the game. He was the Sports Illustrated Player of the Week.
Yep.
And that was the Evansville and Butler games were huge games back then. Evansville doesn't even have a football program anymore.
Right.
When they did, and you talked about your defense, and the defense kind of led the charge in those years.
Right.
That was a game which Ozzie Young amassed over 300 yards of offense. Mm-hmm. As I said, Sports Illustrated Player of the Week. But it took a defensive play late in the game. I don't even remember how this game ended. We were up by 6 late in the game. And you remember how it ended? It was John Pelia. Talk about local players.
Yeah.
What happened? You remember the end of the game now?
I think I might have been concussed that year too. 5 times.
He picked up a fumble, and John was about 280.
Yes.
And he lumbered for a touchdown to put the game away. I remember the buses pulled back up, and there were hundreds of students waiting when we got back in Evansville that day.
Yeah. That I remember. That I remember.
And that was like showing that this team had done something because it had been so long of tough football years.
Yeah, I felt like the first year I got here, you looked up in the audience and it's parents, and it smaller than my high school crowds a lot. And by the time I was a junior, but especially by the time I was a senior, there were parties, there were tailgating. I think we changed the culture, and that was one of the coolest things. And just the guys I played with were so good. They really were so good. And it's funny you mentioned John Paliak, who's now about 210 pounds and was on Survivor.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he was 280-pound DN back then. Yeah.
The season ends, and there's actually talk of you having a future in pro football. What happened after that?
Well, the 7th or 8th game of that year, I had a compound fracture. In my hand. The options were I wasn't going to play, and my parents heard this story many times because I did it a couple times. I chose to have a metal plate and 10 screws put in my hand so I could play. The problem was I knew that part of the rehab was going to be a long time. If I got to play, I wasn't going to be able to work out for a while. There was lots of things with the hands. And, fortunately, my agent worked really hard. I was able to run for teams at the NFL Combine. I couldn't bench. I couldn't do a lot of things. And, that's one of those bittersweet things, man. But I have no regrets, and I loved playing the game.
You I've announced Valpo for 35 years. I'm not joking. Shayne was the hardest hitter. Everybody looks at the interception numbers. Shayne was the hardest hitter in Valpo for the last 35 years. I think without question.
That was the part of my game I took pride in.
And now you are in business and you're in Valpo. Tell us about it.
We are, at least some. You know, I started out my career, after I was done trying to play ball, I ended up becoming a teacher later on. I became an assistant football coach, then a head football coach at Hammond Gavitt, where I was like, welcome back, Cotter. It was my school. And then I went to the dark side and became a assistant principal, then a principal, then a school superintendent. But my wife all along had grown this business called Homenclature, our furniture store. Started out as a little mom and pop kind of, 2,000 square foot space in Munster. And she grew it over the next 7 to 8 years where it just started to get really big. And then we decided at that point, I believe our girls were pretty darn young. We decided to move back to Valpo. We built a house on the north side of town and we moved our business here. 13 years? That's about right, Ben? So 17 years, something like that. So we've been here, I think we've been here about 16, 17 years, and we are in Calumet. And I left education because once I went to the superintendency, I hated it. I'll be real honest. I loved being a principal. I loved being around kids. I loved helping kids. But then once you get to a certain level and you're dealing with politics every day, the school boards, she had grown the business, said she needed me. And it took about a year, but I made the decision to leave, and it was the best thing I ever did because I got to see my kids grow up.
Shayne Snider, congratulations on Valpo.